right, welcome back everybody to the channel. I got Stephajn with me here today, and we're doing a special episode of logical fallacies, but it's not a logical fallacy we're covering this time. We're actually covering a thought experiment. And
thought experiment, you say?
Yes.
Well, this calls for something special then. I'm going to have my thinking cap on if this is going to be a thought experiment.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to title this a thinking caps video then. No. I can't steal your content. But anyways, it does require some thinking because we're going to cover the subject of the ship of Theseus. And for those of you who have never heard of the ship of Theseus, basically the concept is you have a ship and it's sitting in a museum. And over time, the wood begins to rot a little by little. And so what the museum does is they replace those pieces of wood. And over the course of a century or so or more, that ship has had every plank and every part on it replaced. And now, is that still the original ship, or is it a completely new ship? So that's the thought experiment we're going to be dealing with today. And we're also going to use this thought experiment to see if the Watchtower organization is still the same religion as it was when they first started compared to how it is now.
No!
All that new light, you know.
Yeah, the light keeps getting brighter and brighter, doesn't it?
I think you mispronounced Dumber and Dumber there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Man, and it was in my notes. Make sure you pronounce that right.
Damn teleprompters.
So, also, there's also another question that goes along with this thought experiment as well. All right, so brings up another question as well on this subject, because it's a thought experiment about if the ship is still the original ship or not, but at what point does it not become the original ship anymore as well? Mm-hmm. So you're replacing all these parts, and then there's some point there in the middle where it's not the original ship, but rather it's becoming a new ship. So, like I said, we're going to compare this to the Watchtower using this thought experiment, keeping that in mind, and let's go back and see where Watchtower roughly began. We're not going into a comprehensive history or anything in this video, but we're going to bring out some things from when they first started compared to how their teachings are now for these things. So the first thing I was going to talk about with that is the memorial partakers. And before 1935, everybody was a memorial partaker and had the hope of going to heaven. But then the Watchtower changed that over the years and opened it up for more people after 1935, to the point where it's just ridiculous right now. And
there was that convention that they had when they talked about this great multitude, and what was it? Was it Rutherford? Basically asked everyone who does not have the hope of going to heaven in their hearts to stand up, and a whole wackadoodle of people stood up, and he announces like, "Behold the great multitude," or something, and it's like, oh look, it's the great crowd from Revelation chapter 7. Yay! Like, yeah.
Yay, new light. Well, I wrote down all the numbers here from 1935 and roughly going every 30 years. So starting in 1935, there was 63,146 that attended the memorial. Of that number, 52,465 were partakers. Now, let's skip to 1965. There was 1,933,089 who attended the memorial, of which 11,550 were partakers. So we see that number going down quite a bit.
That's a whole lot of 144,000 suddenly dropping dead, according to their doctrine.
Exactly. And then let's skip to 1995, where 13,147,201 attended the memorial, of which 8,645 were partakers. So again, another drop in numbers, but not as significant as it was from 35 to 65. Now, what was interesting about this is in the 90s, growing up, I remember we were basically being told to watch the number of partakers as they go down, because that was a sign of Armageddon getting closer, because the anointed would be going to heaven, and then there wouldn't be an anointed left on earth, so Armageddon would have to start. And I remember every year we'd get the yearbook and we'd look at it, oh, the number's going down, and all the way till 2006, that number was going down. So we're going to jump to 2019. So I didn't write the numbers for 2006 down, but it was still in the 8,000 range, roughly. I remember that much from looking at it earlier today. Now, from 1995 to last year in 2019, there was 20,919,041 who attended the memorial, of which 20,526 were partakers. Now,
oh, I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh at that.
yeah, exactly. And that is what, 24 years, right? So 24 years later. So the first two jumps were first couple jumps were 30 years apart. This is a little less time than that. And the numbers from 2006, which was still in the 8,000s, more than doubled in 13 years.
Yeah, and according to Watchtower, they are likely mentally disturbed or troubled people that are participating.
I think they're referring to themselves too when they say
that. I mean, how else are you going to explain this idea of we had 8,000 and some change in 1995, and now we have 20,000? Well, there must be some real wackadoodles there that are eating and drinking at the memorial.
And then some of the other stuff I was reading about too was about how, well, we get these newly baptized ones and they get so eager that they think they're part of this heavenly calling, and then later on they come to realize that they're not. So they're trying every excuse in the book here to push off these numbers as somehow they're okay, and don't worry about it. It's all good.
It's gone from being a key performance indicator, a KPI, to being a statistic instead.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just ridiculous how they do that.
So there's a part that's been replaced, eh? A KPI to a statistic.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. They like their statistics though. They really do.
Oh yeah.
Hang on just a moment here. 2007.
Still just cracks me up. 20,000.
Oh, I know.
Destroys me. Oh.
All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to bring up one of the articles from JW.org and their May 2007 Watchtower here. So this article is talking about when does the calling of Christians to a heavenly hope cease. So again, this is the May 1st, 2007 Watchtower questions from readers for our viewers that are trying to follow along. And if you notice here in the second paragraph, I'm just going to go ahead and read it. It's easier than me trying to paraphrase it. It says, from the late 1800s until 1931, the main thrust of the preaching work was the gathering of the remaining members of the body of Christ. Now, we know that they're talking about the 144,000. In 1931, the Bible students took the Bible-based name Jehovah's Witnesses, and in the November 15th, 1933 issue of the Watchtower, the thought was expressed that this unique name was the denarius referred to in Jesus' parable recorded at Matthew 21 through 16. And so it gives a little bit more history. Then we go down to this next paragraph about in 1935, where they announced the great crowd of other sheep. And that year, the thrust of the disciple-making work turned to gathering the great crowd. So this is their way of trying to explain away why the numbers haven't gone away at all. Rather, they were still around throughout all this time. So this is their way of, circular reasoning, really.
I find something very interesting in this paragraph. The one that's at the top of the screen there that starts with in 1935.
Mm-hmm.
About 3/4 of the way down, halfway through, where it says, like, after 1966, it was believed that the heavenly call ceased in 1935. This seemed to be confirmed when almost all who were baptized after 1935 felt that they had the earthly hope. I especially have to look at this and think this is whitewashing on Watchtower's part. All who were baptized after this felt they had the earthly hope. More like we're told they had the earthly hope and no hope of getting to heaven, I think, is probably much more accurate than what they're writing here.
Oh yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, they always have a way of whitewashing their history anyways, to make it, at the moment when they're printing whatever they're trying to say, to fit what they're trying to tell you. And it's because, the average witness isn't going to go back and look this up and research it. They're just going to take it for their word and, oh, okay, that's just how it is.
I mean, they pulled the same rabbit out of their hat with regards to 1975 and using the terms like some believed or some felt when it was in Watchtower's own literature. But, they just want to whitewash that. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, stay alive till 75.
Mm-hmm. Why are you looking forward to the year 1975?
Exactly. So this article, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but if any of our viewers want to look it up, here it is for you to, take a gander at and really do your own research when it comes to these things. Don't just take my word for it. Don't take Stephagn's word for it, because we're just two idiots on YouTube trying to debunk this whole thing.
Oi, speak for yourself.
I don't have to. I'm speaking for you because you're on my channel.
Damn it.
I mean, isn't that why you came onto my channel?
That wasn't in the contract.
It was implied.
Oh. See, I must have just felt that I was going to be respected.
See, there again, you were trying to go ahead of James Winter's chariot here, and knew
Running
what was
ahead.
revealed to you.
I'm sorry for being so presumptuous, Brother Winter.
Yes, better be. So the next thing I wanted to cover briefly on this as well was part of their ship back then of Watchtower teachings. You go before 1935, you have the anointed, right? Everybody is going to heaven. After 1935, it's completely different. I mean, as far as doctrines are concerned, that's a huge change. You might as well take about half the ship right there and have changed it. If we're using the ship of Theseus as our example, So, you got a huge change. So right there, is it the same religion, or is it still the original religion that was started?
Well, basically, like the reward for compliance has suddenly been changed. It's like it's like being downgraded, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, if only you had signed up, if only you had signed up for this cellular service back then, we could have given you this special offer. But now, you're just going to be treated like every other Tom, Dick, and Harry. So,
You're no longer grandfathered into the heavenly calling.
exactly. That's a really good analogy, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And so now we're going to discuss some other teachings and beliefs that they had before 1935, even before 1925, because that's when a lot of these were started to be cut out. And if we go back into how we were taught growing up as witnesses, we were always told in 1919, Jesus came down and he inspected all the religions of the world and found that the Bible students, not the Jehovah's Witnesses, were the true religion that he was going to back, and that was his people, right? So, first of all, there's Bible students in 1919. So how are they identified? Everybody knew them as the Bible students, which, interestingly enough, they're still around today, but just not as large as they were back then.
Yeah, they splintered, and the International Bible Students Association of today, I believe, if you look at their website, they still talk about Pastor Russell quite a bit, and I don't know this for certain, but I believe that they still use studies from the scriptures as their textbooks of choice.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that would be something to behold nowadays as a Jehovah's Witness, because the stuff they taught then was completely different from what it is now, and I have no idea what the studies in the scriptures even say. So, because I haven't even had a chance to ever look at those.
Well, as a teaser, it's these volumes that talk about pyramid inches and so on. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, let's not get into like that whole Freemasonry discussion.
Right.
But Russell had this belief that, and he wrote this in Studies from the Scriptures, that God created the pyramids of Giza to be his great witness about when Armageddon would come. And he had this hypothesis, at best, that's really all you can think of it as today, that the different measurements, like an inch for a year, would point to when certain events would take. So if you measured from this point on the pyramid to this particular feature, like whether it was like a crack or a wall or load-bearing beam or something to that nature, that, well, if you count the number of inches, then this is when major world events were going to take place. He also taught in this book, or one of the books, that the people of color would become white when the new paradise earth arrived, and that that their coloring was part of the curse put upon one of Noah's sons for showing off Noah being naked and drunk. Like, this is the organization that believed that Jesus looked at them and said, "That's my people." So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you look back at that now and you laugh at that kind of belief and that kind of thinking, but that's really what they taught back then, along with just some common things that we growing up, we never got to do. Christmas and birthdays and those kind of things, those were all being done back then. Blood transfusions were okay back then. They used the cross. They even still worship Jesus at that point. So what of all of those things that we just listed off do the Jehovah's Witnesses do now? And then again, and now we had already talked about this a little bit before. So now they've got all these different teachings from now to then, completely different. It's like, again, it's a whole new religion. So we took the anointed, and I said about half the ship. You take all this other stuff, that's the other half of the ship. You've got a completely new religion. 1935, they rebranded under Rutherford. He was more of a businessman, and he was able to push the brand and make the religion grow.
Yeah.
And they did this all under the guise of calling it New Light. And they still use that to this day to excuse when they make a mistake, when they're wrong, well, if they would ever admit they're wrong. And really, going back to the whole ship of Theseus example. So you've replaced every plank on the ship. And in this example, I'd say, hell, they even redesigned the ship. You know, you're going from, the Defiant to the Enterprise. It's a completely different ship.
Even the organizational hierarchy and structure. I mean, when you think about the idea that back then, in those days, the president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was the one that really steered the ship, doctrinally speaking, sort of thing. I mean, Charles Russell had his name on the front cover of Studies from the Scriptures, and then after him, J.F. Rutherford put his name on the front of books. Like, these were books that were supposedly written by these men. And even Rutherford tried his hand at prophecy by trying to claim that in 1925, ones like Abraham and David and so on would be resurrected to help guide the ship, so to speak. And thus Beth Serene was built, this massive house that wound up becoming Rutherford's palace to live in, kind of thing. So, I mean, you have that going on, and then even after rebranding in 1935, bear in mind that it was in 1947 they printed the article about how excommunication was a satanic or pagan practice, and then 5 years later did an exact about face on that. Like, we're talking about replacing a wood beam with not even another piece of wood. Instead, like, all right, now we're using like metal instead, like, you know, not even the same building materials anymore.
Exactly. And again, to add to that a little bit more, all the flip-flops they've had in doctrine, are blood transfusions okay? Yes, no, yes, no. Can you get an organ transplant? Yes, no, yes, no. So
who is the king of the North? Oh, it's Russia and its allies. No, wait, now we don't know. Oh, no, it is Russia and its allies.
Yeah, exactly. And then also add to that all the prophecy. Okay, when's Armageddon going to come? Well, first it was like, 1874, I think, and then changed to 1919, and then 1925, and what else? Wasn't the one in 1950 somewhere?
I'm not sure.
And then, of course, the big one was 1975, which we discussed earlier. And then,
undoubtedly, before the end of the 20th century, they said in one of their
exactly
on a few occasions, like, by the end of this century, we will be in paradise.
And then, if you go and look at JW Facts, they're kind of alluding to 2033 or 2034, somewhere around there. Because they were comparing it to Noah's day, and how it was 120 years after he got the call to build the ark. So, I mean, all sorts of numbers are being thrown around, but yet nobody knows the day or the hour.
Yeah,
but we're sure as hell going to try to guess.
Yeah, they seem to have this idea that they might be able to unlock Jehovah's thinking, and yet at the same time you have the Bible itself that they claim to revere so much, asking really who can know the mind of Jehovah. Now, I may be quoting all of this and whatever else, but I don't want anyone to think that I subscribe to anything that the Bible has to say. I don't believe any of it. Like, yes, there are historical things that took place that the Bible does talk about, but I mean, yeah,
Well, I
this
mean,
they're going against their own textbook. They're running ahead of themselves, for crying out loud.
the Spider-Man comics talk about New York. New York's a real place. Doesn't mean Spider-Man really exists.
Wait, he doesn't? Oh.
Spider-Man's creator also passed away too. Dun dun dun.
On to a better place.
Where he can marvel at his universe.
Oh, well done. Well done.
Uh,
To that.
have a real drink, man. It's like Coca-Cola crap.
You don't know what's mixed in with this.
You Coke addict, you.
For all you know, I may have added some of this to it. All right? Don't judge me.
In the can, right? So, anyways, you had something to add to this that you would mention before we started. You want to talk about that for a moment?
Incoming
We
transmission.
talked about the transporter?
The resurrection.
Okay. I wanted to make sure. So,
I mean, we'll bring that up later.
well, the resurrection and the transporter kind of go hand in hand with each other. So I don't know if you want to talk about it. Like,
Go right ahead.
okay. So think about another one of their doctrines with regards to the resurrection hope. So whether you're talking about somebody who has died and is supposed to be one of the 144,000 being shot up to heaven, raptured to heaven, or you're talking about somebody who died and buried or cremated or whatever else that are supposed to be resurrected to life on earth in paradise, the question arises, what really has been resurrected? Is it the actual person that has been beamed up to heaven or has been reconstructed on earth in paradise? What exactly is that? Now, the doctrine that Jehovah's Witnesses have claims, okay, well, Jehovah knows this person so well, knows every nuance about them, that he can hold all of that in his memory. Even like all of the hairs on your head are counted according to the Bible. So Jehovah apparently knows how many hairs are even on my beard. And where they all are, even the ones that are gray and the ones that aren't, and he can reconstruct all of them exactly as they were. But if I died and my body and all of these hairs decomposed into nothing, or as I actually want to be cremated, or there's a process where you can basically be turned into fertilizer. So this body, in all of its Buddha-like glory, is gone. It's completely gone. Everything that I know and everything that I believe is also gone. So Jehovah is supposedly going to resurrect me to be alive on earth. So, but if all of this has been destroyed, did Stephajn really come back to life? Why is Stephajn speaking about himself in the third person? Stephajn doesn't know. But the sense of identity actually kind of comes into play. And when I was researching a little bit about the ship of Theseus, I'd like to share my screen if I may.
Sure.
Okay. So apparently I can't share my screen because it's disabled.
Do I have to enable it?
Yeah, it says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
I have. How do I see here? There you go.
Now I can do it?
Yep.
Okay. And I want to make sure that
Dude, I can almost see your nose hairs in the camera the way you're looking at it.
You have to just bear with me a moment. Um, okay. So there are 4 resolutions that are proposed according to the Wikipedia article about the ship of Theseus. And one of them I especially found interesting, and that was the gradual loss. Wait, was it that one? Actually, no, it was the no identity over time that I thought was interesting. They had the idea of like a river where water is replenished.
Mhm.
So if you have the water that gets flowing through the river and it is like dumped into the ocean, then you ask the question like, well, am I actually stepping into the same river, or am I stepping into a body of water that is shaped like that river, but it's different water, so to speak? So they say that, you can't step twice into the same river because that water scatters again and then comes together as like in maybe a similar shape, but you don't have the same molecules of water in the same place at the same time to actually be the same river.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, and even the idea about the gradual loss of identity. This was really interesting too, because if you think about the ship and if it's being repaired or parts of it being replaced, they talked about the idea, well, consider, say, the bed in the captain's cabin. If that's the bed in which Theseus himself once slept, but once the bed has been replaced, this is no longer true, and the claim would then be an imposture because a different description would be more accurate. For example, a replica of Theseus' bed. The new bed would be as foreign to Theseus as a completely new ship. This is true of every other piece of the original boat. As the parts are replaced, the new boat becomes exactly that, a new boat.
Mm-hmm.
Hobbes proposed restored boat built from the original parts will be the original ship, as its parts are the actual pieces of matter that participated in Theseus's journeys. So if you look at that from a resurrection point of view, if all of the matter that makes up my body has been taken apart, whether by decomposition or by
Transporter.
or the transporter, which we'll get into in just a moment, or even by cremation, if you put me back together again, are you using the ashes and thus reconstituting them into new organs? Or have those ashes been scattered to the wind, in which case, what comes back? And a really good example of this is the Star Trek transporter. The science, if you will, behind the transporter is that matter is made up of energy, and therefore matter is never actually destroyed. It actually just changes its form into something else. So the transporter in Star Trek works on the principle that you can break down solid matter into energy, pass it through a stream, and rebuild it at the other end. Now, the question arises, how do you store and rebuild a person's personality and all of their thought patterns, beliefs, all of their experiences and everything else, even some of their neuroses and so on? Can that be captured into a computer, like that person's essence? Or when you step into the transporter on Star Trek, are you basically dying by suicide because you are being ripped apart, and then a copy of you is what has come out on the other end? Are you still the same person? Are you still the same person if you die and are resurrected? When I asked this question, even as a child, to like other like adult witnesses around me, they would say, well, you wouldn't be aware of time. So basically it would be like you went to sleep and then a second later you're waking up and it's paradise. So then I thought, but how does that work for the continuity from a person's point of view? Would the resurrected person actually be the person that died? Or is it a copy of that person that just believes that they're the original because they have all of that person's memories?
Mm-hmm.
And, like this is, of course, like a philosophical question that has bothered people for ages, obviously.
It's like that, you and I remember the other week we told you about that show Upload.
Yep.
It's the same concept, where a person's consciousness is uploaded to some computer system for them to have an afterlife. So are they the same person? They might have all the same memories and everything, but how much different are they in their digital version than they were their physical form?
Yeah.
You get the really same kind of concept with that as you do with the transporter. And I even remember, I forget who it was. I was listening to a podcast, and I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson. Don't quote me. I could be wrong. Was talking about the transporter, and they said, well, the only way that could be possible is every time you got transported, you would, like you said, make a copy of yourself. So you wouldn't be the original you. So on the other end, you're a whole new compilation of Stephajn or James, and you're not the original when you come out the other end.
Even on Star Trek 2, there's been a couple of episodes, especially in earlier seasons of The Next Generation, where somebody did die by transporter in some ways. There is an episode where the much hated Dr. Pulaski contracts this disease that makes her get like really old, and it's accelerating her life, and she's going to die. And what they wind up doing is they save her life, because every time you beam somewhere, a copy of your pattern is saved in the transporter. And so they reconstruct her by basically overwriting this aged and wrinkly form of her with this pattern that they had in the transporter. So what was saved in the end? Is it still Dr. Pulaski, the woman that we all tend to hate because of her hate on for Data? Or is it this computer-built version that just believes that it's Dr. Pulaski?
You just made me remember of the episode on Voyager when Neelix and Tuvok were in the transporter, and they got merged together as one. They called it Tuvix or something like that.
Yep.
And so the moral dilemma of the episode was, do we accept this new creation of the transporter basically and keep them, or do we try to separate them back out to their quote unquote original selves again? And of course we know at the end they made the decision to split them back apart again. But again, how much of each other did they still have in them after they got split back apart? They're no longer their original selves anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that, again, just going on this concept of that change, it's a whole set of dilemmas that is a really fun thought experiment to, put out there and think about. I don't think we'll ever really have the answer to that.
Jehovah's Witnesses would tell you that one of two things, probably. Either one, it's best if you not think about that because it's not helpful. Or two, well, trust in Jehovah.
I think
sort it out.
Being a Jehovah's Witness, it's best if you don't think about anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the real problem right there. Because if you start digging and thinking about things and wanting to know, well, hey, wait a minute, what about when they celebrated Christmas back then and Jesus chose them then? Why can't we do it now? Just some, that's along the simple things of it, let alone the more complex matters.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, even if you look at the Bible, the story of the Israelites receiving the Mosaic Law and the Ten Commandments and so on. I mean, the people were supposed to be worshiping Jehovah to begin with, because he's the God of their forefathers and whatnot all. And now Jehovah was formalizing this relationship with them and basically laying down the law, so to speak, about what was going to happen. And there was no tolerance whatsoever if they even were to worship a golden calf.
mhm.
Like, when you think about that story, he said to them, no, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to worship anything else except for me. And then after receiving this commandment, they go and worship a golden calf. There was no sort of grace period where they got to do that. And then Jehovah just said, remember what I said before? No, there was like thousands of people that were killed according to their doctrine. And Jehovah was very, very pissed off with them. So we're supposed to believe that this organization that was, let's just use the analogy, worshiping the golden calf, as it were, by celebrating Christmas. Well, they're okay. I'll sort them out later. Much later. I mean, if it took only 1 year for Jehovah to lay down the law, no pun intended, to the Israelites, then I'm sorry, but it should not take 16 years for you just to sort out that Christmas apparently isn't such a good thing for you.
Yeah.
If you're chosen by Jesus Christ and the light's getting brighter and whatever else, all you're doing is replacing pieces of your doctrine just to satisfy your own preferences.
Well, that was one thing I always kind of had in the back of my head growing up, is like, okay, well, if these things were wrong when they were doing it, when Jesus chose them, and you keep saying, oh, the light's getting brighter, why didn't God, Jehovah, whatever, just come out earlier and say, hey, don't do these things?
Yeah, cut that out
to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could get into a whole nother conversation on that, as far as, stuff in the Bible where that could have happened, regarding a whole slew of issues, which I won't even begin to bring up right now. But, why couldn't you just say, hey, Christmas is bad, birthdays are bad, don't take blood, I mean, just lay it all out. Oh, well, we got to gradually tell you because it would be too much for you to take if we just gave it to you all at once. That's bullshit.
Yeah. Can you hold on for just 1 sec?
Yeah.
My lights just went out.
Yeah, I saw it kind of flickering there. You joined the dark side.
Apparently. I think it's bitching at me because the batteries in it are wanting to die or something. So we'll have to see what happens there.
So that brings up another question, though. If you recharge a rechargeable battery, is it still the same battery?
We're gonna improvise by just bringing this one over a little bit.
Okay.
We'll go from there. All right. Still looks decent.
If you say so.
Yeah. Decent as can be expected considering I'm the subject, so. But yeah, like those are things that kind of make you go, just a little bit. Is Watchtower the same organization as they were when they started? Are they still the same organization that Jesus chose, considering all of the parts and whatever else that have been replaced? I think the only thing that they still have in common now, as back then, is that they're preaching, albeit in a very limited fashion these days with their carts. Yes, and they're still claiming that Jehovah's Kingdom is the answer to everything. Apart from that, I think that's about the only things that they still hold on to. Well, that in 1914.
Yeah, exactly. And even then, that 1914 changed because they used to say that was when Armageddon was coming, and then they had to change it when Armageddon didn't come to, oh, well, now that's the beginning of the last days. And, so even that has changed.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering when they're going to finally let go of that teaching and say, you know what, we got that wrong too.
I don't think they'll ever let go of that one.
It's going to take a long time for them to. They're going to have to eventually, I think, but they're holding on to it and milking it for everything they got, especially with this never-ending overlapping generations thing going on now.
I think the overlapping generations thing has kind of bought them some time,
Exactly,
so to speak, to kind of keep going. Like it's like being on life support. It's bought them some time, but I mean, I don't think a lot of people are really buying into it, and they're just kind of like putting on the rose-tinted glasses with regards to that one, and just waiting on Jehovah. But I think in the end, what would most likely happen is, given enough time, maybe after you and I are both gone from this earth, if Watchtower is still around, I really hope to Bob the Sandwich Maker that they're not, that then they will claim that 1914 is, I don't know, the start of a fresh 2,100 and some odd years of days or something. Like, yeah.
Right. Instead of 2,520 years, it's going to be 2,520 months. Of course, we probably passed that by now, since then, haven't we?
Yeah.
Let's do the math.
Or they'll find some other way, because like even that example that you gave before, they'll, they claim like, oh, well, later on we realized that this parable had absolutely nothing to do with the other sheep. Maybe in the end what they'll wind up doing is saying, well, this dream about 7 times and times and times and half a time has absolutely nothing to do with counting when Armageddon is going to come or whatnot, and it's just something else.
Yeah.
Maybe all it really is just 7 years of Nebuchadnezzar losing his brain.
Yeah, but still, they're going to try to fit it into their narrative no matter how you stack it up.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have something to tell the people about it. But they've got to, get together in their, group and, brainstorm ideas on how they can keep that going.
Just got to keep them on the hook. That's all that they really have to do, is just keep people on the hook long enough to get their money.
That, and also to keep them on the hook so they keep getting their children on the hook generation after generation, so that way they can keep perpetuating this.
Yeah.
It's the dangling the carrot in front of the donkey. That's all they keep doing.
It's kind of interesting too, just thinking about that idea about the money. I mean, remember too that the Watchtower itself, back in Charles Russell's day, literally said, we will never, ever ask for money from people in the pages of this or any of our other publications. The day we do that, we will take that to mean that Jehovah has withdrawn, and there it goes.
Yeah.
Jehovah has withdrawn the light.
Yes.
And our work is over and it's done and there's nothing left to do. Well, look at that. See, the lights have gone out, and
guess the light wasn't getting brighter for you.
It wasn't. Now I'm in darkness.
Yeah, but see, they didn't ask for the money in the publications. They asked for it on their videos. That's how they get around that.
Well, except for the fact that they have had entire pages of their magazines dedicated to how can you donate. True. When you think about the article, just look at any issue of the Watchtower, like the study edition of the Watchtower, usually in the month of November, since the study edition of the Watchtower existed. I can't remember when it came out. There's always that article about how God loves a cheerful giver and ways in which people choose to give. And then there was the whole story about Dark Spilver and how she called out the idea. Look at this, an entire page asking people to go to jw.org/donate. So they did it. There's another piece of their ship, another piece of their foundational belief. Here they are ruthlessly and shamelessly plugging for donations in their literature, when even even in some of the earlier editions of that November study article, they even quoted their own Watchtower article saying, "We'll never ask for donations." So even in the last few years, like, you've seen this idea like, all right, yeah, well, it's okay for us to ask for donations. That's fine. We found a way to do it. We'll use the story of the Tabernacle building to do it.
Yeah. Or the one they like to use all the time was the one with the old lady at the temple in Jesus' day with her 2 coins of small value. You know, here, look at her. She gave everything she had. So, you know, surely you can too.
No, I can't, and don't call me Shirley.
Right? Oh, man. So anyways, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Unless you have any final comments you want to add.
Well, I just want to say thanks for inviting me to be on the show. I'm sorry that my technical equipment sort of gave out on me. These battery-powered lights don't operate as long as I thought they do. So.
Oh no, it was a pleasure having you, and thank you for bringing your thinking caps to the, logical fallacies hour here.
Keep it on and keep it well oiled. That's what I always say.
Exactly. And again, this video is being shot during the whole COVID-19 pandemic going on. So I wish everybody to stay safe, stay healthy, and to always continue to love yourself, love others, and do no harm. And thank you for watching.
Live long and prosper, everybody.
Live long and prosper.
Transfer of data is complete.